Hello, everybody. It is July 20th, 2026 here in the United States of America. And in this video this evening, this is going to be a fairly short one. I'm actually going to talk about why there is no simple solution or a simple way to bypass the Strait of Hormuz and transport oil from the oil fields of Iraq, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar out of this particular region here and away from this choke point and to a safer location to actually offload the oil onto ships to be transported. Why the Strait of Hormuz is really the only viable option for the foreseeable future, definitely right now, and why this is such a very important and crucial area for Iran to maintain control of if it wishes to put sufficient economic pressure on the West to stop this war. Ultimately, that is their strategy. They just need to have enough offensive capability to dissuade ships, maintain enough offensive capability to dissuade ships from actually traversing the Strait. They can do that with drones and ballistic missiles. Now, drones don't have to sink these ships. All they have to do is damage them, and that's enough to dissuade the ship and make it turn around. Or they could possibly disable it where it's at and capture the ship if need be. This doesn't require heavy artillery. This doesn't require large amounts of ballistic missiles. This just requires a drone with enough explosive potential to damage or disable the ship, not outright sink it. That's doesn't seem to be their goal, and I believe they haven't really sunk any freighters that are attempting to actually go through the strait. Now, a particular individual on my last video suggested in the comments that one solution would be for Elon Musk's boring company to dig tunnels and pipelines away from the Persian Gulf and to safer locations in the Red Sea. Now, let's talk about why that's not really a viable solution, at least for this war. Maybe in the future that's something that can be done, but not right now. So, from what I understand, and I'm not sure how true this is, the sources that I have read suggest that the United States has about 41 days left in its strategic oil reserves. So that's if that's true, then let's say the clock is ticking and the United States is going to want to end this war and open the straits within the next month and a half. Now, a project of that magnitude, even if, before I continue on, even if the United States had a larger supply than just 41 days, maybe that's not true. Oil prices are still rising. Gas prices around where I live at have already gone up almost $1 from where they were about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's putting a good bit of economic pressure on the West, a good bit of economic pressure on politicians here in the United States. Iran's main goal in this war is not a military victory. It's not a victory through force of arms. They're not going to be able to physically destroy the U.S. presence in the region. What they are trying to do is put enough economic pressure on the Gulf states and the West in general through seizing control over the Strait of Hormuz and damaging infrastructure all around the Middle East. Is well, they want to dissuade tourism in the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. You have Dubai in the UAE. You have this area is very popular for tourism. It's very wealthy, and they've built some very large, beautiful cities. Now, if they make these areas perpetually dangerous with drones falling from the sky rather consistently, well, that dissuades tourism, and that puts a fair bit of economic pressure on these governments to not allow the U.S. to, I guess, use these bases in the region to carry out their foreign policy goals. Also, too, rising gas prices. The Iranians understand this very well. That rising gas prices put strain, cause strain here in the United States. There have been some economic woes over the past 2 years. Nobody wants rising oil prices, and oil prices that cause gas to rise above $4.50 a gallon, upwards of over $5, cause a great bit of discontent in the United States, and that blame always lands at the feet of the president, like it or not, even if it's directly his fault or not. He is the man in charge. He's the man who takes the blame. So with the midterms coming up, I'm sure the Iranians are hoping to cause gas prices in the United States and across the West to rise sharply. This puts pressure on the politicians in charge, currently enacting, these seeking these foreign policy goals in regard to forcing Iran to submit. They did try to decapitate the government. That didn't work out. Iran started to decentralize its command structure. Now that doesn't really seem like a possibility at this point, like it did at the beginning of the war. So as long as Iran can survive in some capacity and retain enough offensive capability to dissuade ships from actually going through the strait, and keep in mind, all it really takes to dissuade a ship is to slightly damage it. With a small drone, they don't need to sink these ships. They either need to disable them or damage them. Just the threat of force alone is causing ships to not want to cross the straits. These drones are small and hard to shoot down. And also these ballistic missiles, if they were to use them, especially hypersonic missiles, are extremely fast and damn near impossible to shoot down even with air defense systems. It can be done, but it's very difficult. So that's their goal, I believe, in the long term, is to leverage the straits to leverage economic pressure on the West and to purposefully damage infrastructure across Gulf regions, across the Gulf states, and to hurt tourism, because that does take quite a bit of money out of the pockets of people living in the UAE. Okay, so let's talk about these proposed pipelines here that this particular person suggested be dug. I'm not picking on this person. I understand where they're coming from, but I don't think it's a viable solution, and here's why. Look how big Saudi Arabia actually is. Look how wide it is, okay? It's a very long distance between Kuwait, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates to get to the Red Sea. If you zoom out a little bit, you can see that Saudi Arabia is actually just as wide, if not slightly wider, than Iran. You're talking about a very... I think it's close to 900 miles. If you look here at the bottom of the Google Earth toolbar, it looks like that's close to 900 miles. That's a very long pipeline to put in place. That is a project that would take years to complete. And this war necessitates a solution that can be found within a few months, given the reports that the U.S.'s strategic oil reserve only has 41 days left until it's bone dry. Now, this is from the word of a journalist. Keep in mind, journalists have also said that Russia has been on the verge of collapse now for almost 5 years, and we have yet to see that. They ran out of ammunition in 2022 and found a magic ammunition well where it just keeps reappearing and they keep using it. They actually did run out 5 years ago. So don't really trust the words of journalists when it comes to things like this. They often get it wrong. But if that were the case, then a project that would take years is not really a viable solution to leverage enough economic pressure on Iran to get it to actually stop the war. I mean, the goal of this, of removing all oil exports from the Persian Gulf, or the need to use the Persian Gulf, is to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz is something that is no longer of any consequence to the economic well-being of the world. That takes it out of the equation completely. Now, that is a very ambitious project. You would have to dig pipelines, I'm assuming all the way from the Iraq and Kuwaiti oil fields, United Arab Emirates, all the way across to ports on the Red Sea. Now, this raises some other problems too, because now you're transporting Iraqi and Kuwaiti oil directly through the territory of another country that I'm assuming will force these countries to pay to use its transit network. I don't know how the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, and Kuwait would feel about such a thing. Now, keep in mind too that relations between Gulf states are not always the best. It's a fairly dysfunctional region. These countries are all mostly led by kings that are fairly unpopular with their the people they rule over because of dissatisfaction with their allegiance to the West, and this with this apparent neglect of, and this is from their point of view, many people in these countries are sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and they feel like their leadership is rejecting it and refuses to stand up to Israel and the West as a whole, which is also something the Iranians are keenly aware of and are trying to leverage against the Gulf states to get the Gulf states to, well, put pressure on the United States to leave the region. But anyways, so yes, digging pipelines across 900 miles of desert and rugged terrain is something that would take years to accomplish. Now, this person also talked about digging tunnels. I'm assuming maybe to just completely bypass this region and go underneath it and through Oman and maybe down here further away from regions that the Iranian military could reach easily with drones. Now, Iranian ballistic missiles are able to reach Tel Aviv, so I'm assuming even if you did build ports in the Red Sea during a war, they could probably harass these ports with long-range ballistic missiles and hit them as they're being constructed, and also possibly hit the pipelines as they're being constructed as well. So no, I just don't think that's a viable solution. I don't think there's a really good way to get around the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, you dug tunnels through here, maybe you dug a canal. I mean, these projects would take years. Okay, this is something that I'm sure the U.S. State Department wants a solution for much faster than 10 years. They would like this war to be over within the next few months at a minimum. Because again, politically, many leaders across the West, especially in the United States, can't really afford $5, $6, $7 a gallon gas prices, and they know that, and the Iranians know that as well. So, and at this point, I think really what do they have to lose? They know the United States doesn't have a good staging area to launch any kind of ground invasion of the country. Any kind of major amphibious operation is not really something I think the United States Navy in its modern form is really capable of carrying out. Not saying if you gave them enough time to build up their logistics, they couldn't. I'm sure they could. The United States Navy is filled with very capable people. But I think Iran knows that the threat of a direct ground invasion on its territory isn't really something that it has to worry too much about at this moment. And as I mentioned in my previous video, there's a lot of terrain they can use to hide ballistic missile systems and drone launch points. I mean, look at this terrain. It's rugged. It's easy to hide things. I'm sure it's filled with caves, crevices, bunkers. Iran is not a flat desert. It is a very mountainous and rugged country. The perfect country in which to hide things like ballistic missile launch sites and bunkers. It's definitely more advantageous. It has more advantageous terrain than I would say much of Iraq and Saudi Arabia, since most of this is just wide open desert. I think that's one of the issues that the Iraqi army really faced in the first Gulf War was there's nowhere to hide right here. Nowhere to hide. And the United States flattened Iraqi divisions in this border region during the Gulf War because it's wide open desert. And, well, once a heat signature is found and you have a column of tanks attempting to move across open desert with no air cover, well, that ends pretty quickly. Now, I'm not trying to knock the U.S. by any means in this video. I'm not on here as like an advocate for anybody or an activist. I'm just giving my assessment of the situation as I see it. Now, does the United States have a much superior military all around to what Iran has? Yes, absolutely. But it's how you're able to use that military in any given situation. That's really what it comes down to. Like in the Vietnam War, the United States obviously had a much superior military to the North Vietnamese. But because of the nature of that war, that superiority was negated by the terrain and the goals of the conflict and the limitations placed on the United States military for political reasons. The United States has limitations placed upon it because of the nature of this war, limitations that really keep it from using its full capability against the Iranian regime, and they're aware of this as well. So what do I think the solution is to this dilemma around the Strait of Hormuz? Frankly, I can't really think of one right now. I am not entirely sure. I think what the United States is attempting to do right now is to cause as much pain as possible to the Iranians to force them to the table by striking infrastructure, by hitting as many targets as they can, by putting what seems to be unending pressure on the Iranians to where they feel like that no matter what they do, the United States is just going to keep hitting them and hitting them and hitting them. And then this will bring them back around and force them to the table. They're basically trying to pound the Iranians into submission while the Iranians try to leverage economics and oil prices against their adversaries. So you have one side using military force, Yes, there's sanctions on Iran. Yes, Iran's military economy is struggling fairly badly. But I think this war is mainly being prosecuted with outright military force from the West's point of view, and the Iranians are attempting to fight this war using economic leverage because of their control of the Straits. But just to sum things up, no, I don't think pipelines are a solution to this, at least in the near term. Maybe after the war is concluded, to prevent something like this from happening in the future, maybe Saudi Arabia will invest in pipelines to the Red Sea. Maybe Kuwait and Iraq will think it's a good idea, perhaps, but that's a project that would take years and years to accomplish. So I guess we'll see. But anyways, that's all I really wanted to talk about in this video tonight. I read that comment and it's something I wanted to bring up. Thank you for leaving that comment, by the way. I did appreciate it. It gave me something to think about. I forget the user's name exactly. But as I mentioned, I just don't think it's a realistic idea given the time frame we're talking about here. This war is not going to drag on for another 5 years. The U.S. absolutely doesn't want it to go on that long, and frankly, nobody in the region does. It's bad for business all around. The Gulf states are hemorrhaging money. They're losing money from not being able to transport oil through the Strait of Hormuz. They're losing money from declining tourism in this area. In the United States, public is dealing with, again, rising oil prices, which does cause a fair bit of discomfort in a country like ours that requires a lot of driving. Just for example, I live almost an hour from where I work at, and I drive almost 420 miles a week to get to my job. So rising oil prices are definitely something I feel in my pocket. It's not fun paying $5 a gallon for gas when I have to drive 80 miles round trip every day to my job. So yeah, not super fun, but it's just the way things are for now. But anyways, that's it. That's all I wanted to talk about. I'll be back. I'm actually going to do a video every 2 days. I did one Sunday, or I did one Saturday. I skipped Sunday, did one today, and I'll be back Wednesday evening. God willing, with another video and another analysis video just like this. I really enjoy doing things this way. It's fun. I actually like talking about conflicts and strategy. That's kind of my bread and butter. Get to use my college degree, which is pretty cool. Get to have some fun doing it. But I hope everyone out there has a fantastic evening, and I will be back Wednesday with another video. And this time I think I'm going to talk about the Ukraine conflict a little bit and what's currently happening. But until next time, everybody have a good night.